AI is a tool. Don't worry about how it works. Worry about what it can do for you and what it can do to make your life better, to make more money for you, allow you to do things faster, because that's the mirror image of making more money. If you can do things faster, you will make more money.
Doug, you have been working with AI since 1998. What first made you curious about this field?
Well, it was really that the tools that I was using were running out of gas, if you will. I was using classical statistical tools to build predictive models, and I was working over in Switzerland at with in conjunction with UBS Bank, and they had a vast amount of data. And basically, it was more data than I could fit into a regression or something like that. So I had to look around for other tools. I came upon what became AI, in particular, predictive analytics of AI. And we used that in Switzerland and then in later companies to do predictive modeling.
So, was there a moment when you thought this is going to change the world?
There was a moment where I thought it was going to change my life. We did a test and we dug out a textbook. And the textbook example that we were testing against was predicting reoccurrence of cancer. And they had their example and the big description of it. And then they showed the data that they had put in using statistical procedures. And basically, we built a very early, almost a toy AI, and we ran the data through that toy, and it came out with a better solution in 3/4 of a second. So I sort of put everything aside and said, okay, I'm going to dedicate the rest of my career to this technology and fund the development. We were one of the first to develop a commercial version of that AI technology. And I went all in at that point because it beat the statistical technique significantly and in a trivial amount of time.
Right. So, were you in this field from early, when you were in college, you wanted to be in this field, or was it like something different you wanted to be and you turned out to be in IT or?
That was, I was in graduate school and it was, well, I was in a class, I think it was statistics, and there was, again, building a predictive model. And by some chance, I reverse engineered the data set. The data set that was in the textbook had been created artificially by probably whoever wrote the textbook. And I stumbled upon the formula he'd used to create the data set. Therefore, when I built a model, it was a perfect model. And I remember with great pride raising my hand and announcing to the rest of the class that I had the answer, the only answer, because it had perfect statistics. It had an R squared of 1 and things like that. Anyway, and everybody thought I was just being my usual arrogant self. And instead, though, I had reverse engineered it, and the professor asked me for a copy of my work and so forth. Anyway, in graduate school, I became known as Stats Man. Whenever there was a tough problem that had a lot of numbers that had to be analyzed, the rest of my classmates would come to me for help and so forth. So I started going down the quantitative route in graduate school, and then that was a long time ago. I got out of graduate school in 79, so 20, 45, almost 50 years ago.
That's amazing. So, you said you rode the big data wave. What did that look like
Yeah.
in real life?
Well, to start with, I got a job at a company called Epsilon, and I was the account manager, analyst, whatever. They were building a database for Hertz Rent-A-Car. And I think at that time, we only had the data from their golden, whatever their top tier of customers is, number one club. So anyway, we had that, and I think there were an average of 6 transactions, and there might have been 3 or 6 million customers. And we thought that was enormous. So we might have had 18 or 20 million transactions in the database, and it would take hours to pass that amount of data. And we were using round tapes that we hung on the machine and a lot of manual work and so forth. And some of the statistical techniques I was using would, again, run for very long periods of time. so that I'd come home at midnight or something because I had just finished a analysis. So anyway, that was a huge database then. We now have, I'm thinking of one database we have where we have hundreds of millions of records, and we probably measure the data in petabytes. So it has been a big wave, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger because we're all able to gather up more data. For example, I sleep with what's called a CPAP machine, and it records every breath I have taken at night for the past 10 years. And so you just have data collection because data storage has gotten so cheap. Data collection is huge, and why collect data unless you analyze it? So that has put the focus on the analysis of big data, which is what we do using artificial intelligence.
Correct. That's amazing. So when most people ignored or laughed at AI, what made you keep believing in it?
I wouldn't say they laughed at AI. Some of them were hostile, though, to AI. I remember doing a presentation in front of a major corporation, and their chief data scientist basically became red in the face and started pounding on the table and screaming at me that the next words out of my mouth better not be about AI. It better be about pure mathematics. And by that, he meant statistics. His boss later apologized to me for for the behavior of this guy, but some people got a little bit threatened, and I'd say that is still the case. I come upon people who are uncomfortable with it. They're worried now that it is real and it's going to take their jobs, but I don't believe it will.
Yeah. What do you think? Why people are so, you know, hostile, or like why they're,
It's
so hesitant
Well,
to AI?
it's human nature. Let me take another example. I was introduced to the analytic team at an insurance company, and I was looking around the room, and there were 12 people, and probably 10 of them had PhDs, and a number of them came from foreign countries. And if you put yourself in their position, it is very hard to get a PhD. That's a lot of work. And they had reached in their minds the pinnacle of success. They probably were making more than their whole villages did back home. And they were in an American city living in a probably 3,500 or 4,000 square foot house. So they had a big house and their wife and kids, and they thought they had made it. And then the CEO of their company comes in and introduces me as someone who's going to tell them everything they ever wanted to know about AI, which was a stretch there. But in any case, and he made it clear that the AI could do in a matter of hours what they take weeks to do. So that's a fairly threatening thing. I mean, they certainly didn't want to go back to their villages back in the home country and earn a tiny fraction and so forth, and perhaps live in what we'd consider poverty. And someone who could do something that they usually take a couple of weeks to do, and we could do it in an hour or two, that's pretty threatening. I mean, the logical conclusion is if there were 12 of them in the room with our technology, perhaps their company would not need 8 of them or something. So that's why they got defensive. And in that particular case, sort of they won because that was a couple companies ago. Uh, I had a small company and they simply tested and tested and tested. Okay, now we want to do a test of your technology with this, or now we want to do. So after, I don't know, 18 weeks or something of them testing, I just waved goodbye to them. Small companies have small budgets and things have to happen very quickly. And to spend 18 weeks testing for this one insurance company made no sense. I wasn't going to take it out to 24 or 52 weeks of testing, chewing up my resources just so that they can drag things out. So that one I waved goodbye to. We had other very nice successes though.
When people didn't understand what you were building back then, how did you explain it to them?
I tried using biological examples. So, with most audiences, and by the way, this is still true today. I was at a trade show last week, and we were explaining things, and we tried to make it something that they could understand by finding an analogy in the real world. We used biological analogies. We started out using genetic algorithms. And so we would explain sort of the biological experience of genetics and DNA and things like that. And basically, an equation can be thought of as something similar to DNA. Here are various variables that are in the equation. Here are transformations that are made to those variables. Here are coefficients. Here are interactions and so forth. So it can be a very large, very complex equation. um, Few people that I'm presenting to want to talk mathematics. They want something that they can latch onto. And most people have some idea, sort of, how about evolution and things like that. And so explaining it in those terms was helpful. Now, AI, just the name of it, artificial intelligence, it is implying it is like a brain. It, in fact, is not very much like a brain, but it's an example that somebody can grab onto and, okay, I've got a brain. I think, I learn, and so forth. So when we talk about machine learning, that they can latch onto that and say, okay, so they've figured out how to make a machine learn like I learn or my child learns and so forth. And then they're much more comfortable with it. In the end, we try to talk about what this tool can do for them as opposed to the inner workings of it. I mean, with the exception of some very quantitative people, they typically don't want to know how it works. They want to know, okay, if we've built something that predicts where the next shopping center is going to be in their area, and that would be valuable to them in that they could buy land next to it, or they could buy into that, or they might be the construction company looking to build it, then that would be interesting to them and they'll latch onto it.
Back then, people didn't understand AI. It's understandable. But today, everyone claims to use it. Like everyone claims that we know AI. How can you tell who's real?
Yes, by digging about this deep. I remember going to a convention in the Javits Center in New York City, and I was amazed that almost every exhibitor at that convention claimed to be using AI. But I could ask, since I have pretty good experience in the space, about 26 years, I could ask them one or two questions and quickly find out that they were transforming the term AI into mean anything that was analytical. So many of them had built an Excel spreadsheet into their product in some way. And they thought that using Excel, where it could multiply this column by that column and come out with another column, they believed that that was AI.
Right.
Now, there are certainly AI applications that might link to Excel or whatever, and there may be extensions to Excel or whatever. Talking to those exhibitors, it was clear they didn't know what AI was, but they knew that it was the hot thing. And if they were going to sell any of their product, they better check that box that somebody had, that does this have AI? Oh, yes, this has AI. Okay, good. So I would guess that perhaps less than 10% of them actually had AI.
Wow.
I think that's probably still this true today, although the proportions have changed. I think real AI has certainly entered into the marketplace in a big way. When people are saying they have AI, it may be 60 or 70% actually do.
Okay. I mean, if that's you who know what AI is and you can identify like who's real or not, like for a common man, for somebody
Yes,
who don't know what is AI and somebody is claiming to them, they're, let's suppose I'm a customer and I'm talking to somebody and they are selling me something
yes.
claiming that it's AI is involved. So how can I tell like whether they're real or not?
Well, I guess just a follow up question. I would ask them what their application is learning and how it's learning that. So if it is simply storing data, that's really not learning in any way. Obviously, if it is doing something with text where it is fabricating paragraphs or something like that, or in the world of real estate, if it is writing a description of a house or something out of data, that's real AI. But if it is storing data, or if it's doing simple manipulations of multiplying this times that to come up with this, if it is, again, with real estate, if it is dividing the time on market by something else in order to come up with another factor, where it's simply doing division or multiplication or something like that, that's, in my mind, not AI. By the way, your audience is probably aware, there are different flavors of AI. And the fun thing to watch is they're all kind of merging together as far as the technologies. My company, Swarmalytics, focuses on predictive AI. So we will predict things like which properties will be purchased and how much something will sell for and how long it will be on the market and so forth. So we predict things. Right now, that is quite different from standard generative AI, where it is taking, say, a question from me, and it is going out and researching it and coming back with an answer. That is very different. However, they're coming together in that my predictive AI can take in words. And one of the interesting stories there is that a few years ago, we were analyzing multiple listing services data. That's when a house goes up for sale in the United States, it's MLS data. And we were taking the words in the listing and just analyzing those, and we were finding interesting patterns. We were predicting how fast a house would sell, and the word stainless came up as predictive from the MLS data. And that was because at that time, and I think it's still fairly true, people were, especially housewives, not to stereotype, but they were really attracted to stainless steel appliances. So if in the description the word stainless appeared, and maybe some other words as well, that boosted the prediction very much that that would be a powerful predictor of the house will sell faster. So the words, which are non-structured text, is beginning to filter into the predictive analytics, which have historically been structured data, perhaps lots of it. We have about 16,000 pieces of information about every home in the United States. So it could be a lot of data, but our data tends to be fairly structured. It could include like proximities. What's the distance to the nearest supermarket and so forth? That's all structured. And then we can also absorb some unstructured text, which may come from the generative AI side and make even better predictions with a combination of the two. Then there are other parts of AI, for instance, machine vision. I'm fascinated by it, but I have very little experience in it. I think I invested once in a company that did machine vision, and I did very nicely in that. But other than that, I really can't comment on machine vision very much.
Very well. So, why do you think real estate has been one of the last industries to truly adopt tech?
That's fairly easy in that, at least again, in the United States, which is where Swarmalytics does business, the real estate industry is extremely fragmented. Okay. There are, of course, very large companies building homes and so forth, and very large companies that are selling real estate. But there are, let's see, 600, 2,300, somewhere around there, different builders in the United States that build over 50 homes a year each. Now, each of those has their own silo of data. So some data is readily available. It's public record how many bedrooms are in my home, in my house, okay? But there's other data that only a builder has access to. And because it's in his computer, and that may be above the garage in his home, then that data can't come together to fuel AI. AI eats data in vast quantities. It learns by seeing data over and over and over again, and eventually understands the patterns within the data. Well, if you've got 2,300 different builders and each one has their own database and they're not sharing data in any way, AI can't learn from that. It can't learn, for example, flooring. quality of the flooring in the house. If it has really nice high-end flooring, the house might sell for $40,000 more. Nobody knows the quality of the flooring except the person living in the house and whoever built the house. So again, without that data, AI cannot digest how cost sufficient it is to put better flooring in the house, or what the optimal flooring is, or anything like that. It's just unknown data because it's not linked to any central place where you could access it and analyze it. And most of those 2,300, matter of fact, with almost without exception, so far I have come upon less than 10 of the 300 that are doing anything in artificial intelligence. So that's in the new home building world. It's almost unknown.
Right. You're right. So when you show Swarmalytics to developers or investors, what's their biggest hesitation?
They sometimes request sort of the next best, the next greatest thing. For example, well, it's great you can do this, but do you have zoning data? And we are, I think, within 2 weeks of adding zoning data. And that was a challenge because it's very parochial. An S2 in Topeka, Kansas might mean something different from a S2 in Las Vegas. So we had to unify all the codes and project them down for every property and so forth. So often they ask for, okay, it's great you can do this and this and this. Can you do that? And zoning was a very big request because obviously a builder would rather not go through the process of the legal challenges associated with changing someone's zoning so that they can put in a hotel or something like that. So uh, they ask for more data, and we keep adding more data.
Great. Wonderful. So what's mistake you have seen prop tech founders make when selling to developers?
Let's see that. I think again, trying to get too technical. The builder again, he's got his world, and it's full of things like is the plumbing group going to show up tomorrow so that I can finish this house on time? Right? He's worried about a lot of things, and really he's interested in AI just because there's so much buzz about it, if you will. So he's interested in it. He thinks it's real. So we've made progress there. He thinks it's real. He doesn't understand how it can apply to him and what it would do for him. Will it cost more than he can afford and things like that? So you've got to analyze the presentation to the builder and preferably know a lot about the builder before you go into the discussion. Are we talking about someone who has built 50 homes in the last year or 1,000? Because if he's built 1,000, now we're talking he has the data, he just doesn't know he has enough data to do something with. If he's only built 50 homes, then some of the opportunities have to be put on the back burner until he has more data.
Great. So if a developer says, I've done fine without AI for 20 years, what's your honest response?
Yes. Well, my honest response is he's not going to be around 20 years from now. I did a presentation maybe less than a year ago, I think, and one of the slides showed the consolidation in the construction industry. And don't hold me to these numbers, but it was something like in the year 2000, the public companies that were engaged in construction built something like 20% of the houses. Now in 2025, they're building something like 40 or 60% of the houses. And what that means is if you plotted that out, it's a steady growth rate that more and more of the houses are being built by fewer and fewer of the companies. And if you plot that out within 10 or 20 years, there will be only a half a dozen companies in the United States building houses. So the smaller construction companies can either consolidate by merging or buying others, or they can get smart such that they can compete effectively with the big companies that are using AI. The big companies, for example, have a huge advantage in finance. One of the big ones that is a public company wants to raise money to build 1,000 in some hot area of the country. They just go to Wall Street, some paper moves around, and they have another perhaps $1 billion or something to work with. For the little guy, he's got to go to the bank, convince some bankers who don't do construction stuff typically that he's for real and trustworthy and things like that. Anyway, it's a long process, and he's got other things to do than sit with bankers. He has houses to build and crews to supervise and things like that. So he's got a number of things that are against him, one of them being finance. And if he can even the plane a little bit by using AI, then maybe he won't be one of the ones that goes away in the next 20 years.
Very well said. So, what are developers really afraid of when they say tech is risky?
I think that it's risky in that it's taking them away from what they have done successfully in the past. We all do this. We all go to our comfort zone. I remember someone once saying that everybody tries to apply to a new job what they did in their last job, regardless if the new job has different parameters and so forth. So I think builders, I mean, someone who is, say, just built 50 houses uh, a year, 50 houses, the average house is going for about $400,000 new house in the United States. So $400,000, let's see, moving the zeros, 50, that's 4 million times 5. The guy's got a $20 million business. He's at the low end of my spectrum here. He's only built 50 houses. The big guys are building thousands and thousands of houses, but he's built 50 houses and he sold them all. And he's got a $20 million business, which means he's living comfortably. And, hopefully his wife is happy with her lifestyle, and the kids are going off to private school if he wants, and things like that. So life is good for someone who is building 50 houses a year, presuming he's doing it reasonably efficiently. And then this new technology comes and it's like, okay, is this a waste of money? What can this do for me? I mean, does it, his mind goes in all directions. Does it literally help push nails into wood? No, it's not doing that yet. It's not associated with robots, despite what he's seen in the movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger and stuff like that. No, it's not going to take over the world, and it's not robotic. It's more fundamental things like, what should you charge for those 50 houses when you've completed them? I was drawn into the real estate space partly because I heard that many of the builders were doing a cost plus basis of pricing. They keep books and they add up all the expenses. Let's say the expenses come to $300,000 for easy math. Cost plus, he may simply be adding 15% to that, which sounds like 45,000. And he may be asking 345,000 for the house. That is, I believe, a huge mistake, because is the market hot or cold? If it's hot, he's leaving money on the table. He'll be very happy when they're all sold within 10 days of when he puts them on the market. But he might have hung on to it for 30 or 60 days and gotten another $20,000 in profit. Okay, that would be pretty good. Anyway, cost plus is not a very good way of doing it. Others are doing simple, what they call comps. What are equivalent houses in the very tight geographic area selling for, or what have they sold for? And that is an error of too much simplicity. Typically, a comp is being determined based upon the number of beds, the number of baths, the square footage, and maybe one or two other factors. Okay. So those are the factors they're considering. As I indicated, we've got 16,000 factors about every house. Things like distance to the nearest golf course, that often enters into the models. If you've got a house literally on a golf course or near it, there's a big premium for that. But if you're using just comps of a couple of roughly similar houses, this comp may be, your house may be on a golf course, and this comp may be a mile away or 2 miles away. And that golf course premium is not being considered. And therefore, you would misprice the house. So I think there's a big opportunity to take a lot of data, a lot of historical data, and find we have thousands of proximities in our data. Again, as I said, golf course or a lake or a mountain, or we calculate the view for every property. So I live here in the mountains of North Carolina, and I've seen that a house with a beautiful view where you can look out and see 50 or 100 miles away in some cases, that's going to carry a premium, sometimes up to $100,000 premium for that view. Well, we take data from the government, which shows the altitude of my house, which is about 2,800 feet high, and we can determine what the view is based upon, what's in the way. And unfortunately for me, what's in the way is about 600 yards away from me is another mountain. So I have a beautiful view of that other mountain, but I don't get to see 50 or 100 miles in every direction. So my house was more affordable when I bought it than if it had been at something that was spectacular.
Correct. So for someone hearing about Swarmalytics for the first time, what does it actually do in simple terms?
We take a great deal of data that we have collected. We add to it any data the client may have, and we analyze it using AI. Again, AI, it's just an iterative process that shows the data over and over to some software, and the software finds the underlying patterns. One of the underlying patterns would be just what I was talking about, that if you calculate the view, houses with better views bring a premium. And that adds to the accuracy of the algorithm that is trying to predict how much will this house sell for. So that's what we do. And we apply it primarily to real estate. We do sometimes wander off into other things. We have products such as one that predicts which raw land will be built on. And we might predict whether it's built on for residential or commercial purposes or apartments and so forth. Uh, we attack the problem of pricing a house. How much will this sell for? How long will it be on the market? I think of those as two levers that somebody in driving their business can push depending upon their internal dynamics. You're short for cash, you might push for cheaper houses and understand that that will make them sell faster, right? So if that's the case, that they're cheaper and sell faster, you get that cash quicker, which you may need because you've got some other project that's even better that needs the cash and the banks are giving you a hard time or something. So you need the cash. In any case, these predictions allow builders and people in the real estate industry to sort of drive their business to greater profit.
Great. So you're scouting every piece of land in US. So how does that work?
Well, fortunately, we can start with there's some government data available. In fact, there's a great deal, but that's taken us years and years to gather up because different parts of the US government each have their own silo of data. The Weather Bureau has one silo of data, and the Department of Interior has another, and so forth. We came upon some of the things in our database we have based upon satellite data. We know the number of trees on every parcel of property at I think it's 20 meter by 20 meter block. So my piece of property here, we probably have, or we brought in several hundred records that show basically the topology of my property. From the topology of my property and the topology of my neighbor's properties, we can determine the view, which again is a very valuable piece of information. So I mentioned before satellite data for tree coverage, the canopy, and so forth. So there's a bunch of satellite data. There's also a great deal of demographic data that the United States gathers up. Part of that comes from the Census Bureau, where on every 10 years, the U.S. does a census to determine how many people are in different geographies. so that they can apportion representation in Congress. So, in doing the Census Bureau can ask several hundred questions about race and income and age and size of the household and things like that. So, anyway, we gather all that. We are data enthusiasts at the extreme. We've never found any data that we didn't like. We found some that is not particularly predictive. One of the things we have is the distance to every Civil War monument. I've never seen a model that we build predicting anything where the distance to a Civil War monument comes in as predictive. But that was gathered up by some part of the government at some point. We pull it in. We also we bring in a lot of weather stuff. We're doing some business right now with insurance companies where we have demonstrated the ability to predict at the individual house level the risk of different catastrophic damages. For example, again, my house I mentioned is at 2,800 feet above sea level. My next door neighbor, and this will show you the slope of our land, my next door neighbor is probably at 2,300 feet. So I'm 500 feet higher than he is as far as altitude. 1 year ago, almost today, a hurricane hit our area, causing 100 or more deaths and billions of dollars of damage. Well, my house at 500 feet above his house was safe. Fortunately, I'm delighted to say his house didn't suffer major damage, but others in the area did. We could have predicted which houses were at risk before the hurricane hit. So that's reaching into an organization called NOAA with the historical data of damage and combining that with the altitude and near are any bodies of water nearby and things like that. Again, we just gather lots and lots of data, 16,000 of them. I can't really get into all of them, but general categories are demographic, geographic, topographic, as far as the shape of the land. Let's see, satellite data, things like that. All go in, and our algorithm sorts through them in order to do superior predictions, which hopefully yield increased accuracy in decision making among the users of our data.
Great. So you use the word silo of data. What does that mean? Like somebody who don't know.
Okay, I'm sorry if I'm using sort of local silo, a storage unit of data that is not connected to anyone else. It's an example. We were talking to one of our builders clients, and his mother-in-law kept the books of the company. He was busy out building, and he knew how to build, and he was building beautiful, beautiful homes in a thriving community. Another relative of his was selling the homes and so forth. But his computer that sat in his mother-in-law's attic, where she'd go up when she had time to, do the books and show what materials had just arrived for what job and so forth. That was not connected in any way to any central storage. So that was a silo, I would say, that he had. There might have been very valuable data in there. Who knows? Nobody can access it. And accessing it, well, he would have to worry about, okay, is my data going to be safe? Are my competitors going to see my data? That would be a problem. If the competitors knew how much he was paying for lumber and it was a better deal or something than they were getting, anyway, they might use that to be tougher competitors. So privacy of data is very important, and it encourages people to keep their data to themselves, which is at the detriment of trying to use it for AI.
Great. So what's the Builders Consortium and how does it help smaller builders compete with the big ones?
The Builders Consortium was something I've put together with the idea of countering that silo effect. The idea is everybody can pour their data into a central location where it can be analyzed by AI and they can get out insights that the AI makes. But by using tough modern security methods, one person cannot see another's data. Okay. So this might be, again, going back to what we were talking about, views or something, if we had a consortium here in the Asheville, North Carolina area, one builder might not have enough data to understand how important the view is. He might know that just from experience, but he couldn't quantify that. But if they all put their data together and we saw thousands of building projects and we could see the prices on them and the altitude on them, we could bring it together and better predict how much money somebody's going to get for a house, for building a house, based upon, oh, okay, you're going to be building it up there at 3,500 feet. Well, that causes some transportation issues, but your views are likely to add again, $150,000 or something to that. But that's only possible if everybody blended their data together without revealing secrets to competitors that they don't want revealed. So there's a very large element of trust there. Someone has to trust me that when they pour their data in, that no, their competitors can't see it, and I'm not going to be, putting it up on the internet or something. But they've also got to see the value in terms of, okay, if I can price this better, what if not only I can make more money on houses, but all my competitors can make more money on houses? That's not a bad thing if the entire building industry in this area is all thriving, making more money. What they don't want is, don't let the data be used against me.
Right.
So
So,
that's the Builders Consortium.
correct. That's an amazing idea. So, what part of real estate will AI disrupt most? Buying, building, or selling?
I think selling. Well, we started with the construction area, and that will eventually be disrupted because, again, robots or something like that will be coming in to make construction more efficient. But in a nearer term, I was talking to someone on my podcast a couple of weeks ago, and they specialize in selling real estate that is near a lake. And that's a much different situation. And he's one of the few that is using a lot of AI. And he's using AI to not only help price the houses, he's using it to select who's going to work with him as a real estate agent. So just as there's a huge amount of data about houses, there's a huge amount of data about every real estate agent in the country. What if they sold? What did it start selling at? What did it finally accept at? Uh, how many words were in the description that they wrote for the MLS listing? Just all sorts of things there. And that gentleman is combing through all of the real estate agents who have done any business anywhere near a lake in the United States, and he's evaluating them using AI in order to get the best of the best. And he would rather have one great real estate agent than three who are mediocre. And so, and the economics work his way too. That so he selects the best agents, and then he uses AI to reinforce them. So, for example, on his website, he's able to see where people, let's say, pick a lake. There's a lake called Winnipesaukee up in New Hampshire. He could see who's coming on, not in terms of the name of the person visiting his website to see property around Lake Winnipesaukee, but he can see where they're basically calling in from. Maybe Winnipesaukee, because it's about a 2 or 3 hour drive. Maybe a lot of the people there are coming from the Boston area. So he goes and arms his agents with knowledge that give them an edge over everybody else in selling houses. If the agent knows that somebody who first looked at a house on Winnipesaukee by way of the internet and they live in some suburb of Boston, then they different suburbs of Boston have different levels of affluence, which is important for the agent to know. And they can figure out the drive time and they can do all sorts of things with that data that has come from gathering up data off the website.
So, if every builder in America used AI tomorrow, what would change first?
Well, AI isn't a static thing, AI is changing all the time. I think one thing that will be happening soon is AI will digest the process of building a house, and there will be more components that are built. So imagine a roof that comes in on a truck with the shingles on the roof already in place and things like that. And a crane that just lifts these three things off the truck and puts them in place, and they are bolted down. And putting a roof on a house takes 3 hours or something. That would give the builder a big advantage. They can deliver houses faster, and they can probably do them cheaper. And what you have to do is use AI to do all sorts of work about the shape of the roof and identifying the optimal number of shingles to put on and what's the optimal shingling material and things like that. But in any case, it will go into the actual construction. Today, it can go into the pricing. It can go into the helping with the marketing. If the builder is doing the marketing themselves, those are already in place. It can go into the selection of land where we know who owns all the land in the country. So, which parcels of land have already been acquired by your competitors? That's available. We layer on different things like where is there electricity, which is non trivial in some parts of the United States, getting electric to the place. Where are sewer pipes? That's all available. So, using modern tools, a builder could put in, okay, I want a relatively flat area within the following counties surrounding Asheville, North Carolina. I don't want the elevation to be higher than 3,000 feet because just getting equipment up to the top of a mountain is problematic. And I want there to be electric and this much road frontage and this many trees or whatever. They can put in all those parameters, and every piece of property has already been scored by the artificial intelligence. So think of them as filters. You have around Asheville, I don't know, maybe there's 100,000 parcels of property. You filter out the ones that are already built on, and then you filter out their requests, the builder's requests, and then the AI does the rest and ranks them from here's the best that fit your criteria and are likely to be built on based upon the criteria that we've seen things built on before. For example, no cliffs, things like that. No running water going through the property and things like that. Anyway, it can, in a matter of seconds, come up with a list of here's the property, here's the number of acres, here's a map of it to show you what it looks like, here's who owns it, here's the email address of who owns it, here's the phone number of who owns it, and here's the last tax bill that shows the estimated value, and here's what the Swarmalytics AI says the value is. So it can do that in less than 30 seconds. So that solves. Before we created that, we bumped into some people who were going around literally knocking on doors like of farmers. Mr. Brown, would you like to sell your farm? And that's a expensive and time-consuming way to acquire land, as opposed to if you can sort it down and give your who will ultimately negotiate with the buyer, give your person a lot of information so he knows about it. He may know about the history of it. And again, who actually owns it? Does Mr. Brown own it, or does some trust own it, or Mr. Brown's children, or whatever? All of that information can be used to make the team, the land acquisition team, far more powerful. And that's only beginning to be done in the real estate space in the US. A few of the big companies do it.
It's going to make a big difference. So,
Yes.
if you could fix one broken part of real estate with AI, what would it be?
I think I would go where the money is, and that is on the sales side. We did a test where we predicted which houses would be listed. Right now, it is done almost, I'd say, haphazard. That I will be living in this house for the rest of my life. I love it a lot, and I've been here 10 years and so forth. My chance of listing my house approaches zero. Others are much more likely to. We can find people who are 6 or 10 times more likely to list their house than average. The real estate community should be able to understand that. And the first part of that is finding houses that are going to be sold And then the second part of that is, of course, finding the buyers. And what the real estate world does is the retail side is put the two together. So I think there's a big opportunity to make that very efficient. We do this on a sort of a wholesale basis, in that somebody who buys a home and fixes it up and then sells it, often they just want to do that as quickly as possible, do this to many houses. Well, they need someone who can buy it, and they don't often they don't want to just put it on the market where it will sit for 90 or 180 days kind of thing. So there's a group of people who are professional investors in the United States. They tend to invest locally so that they can go see what they're investing in and so forth. So the food chain would be: original owner sells it to someone who flips it, flipper fixes it up, gives it a coat of paint, repairs some plumbing or whatever, and then sells it to an investor. The investor buys it, has cash money readily available, and he will put it on the market perhaps, or maybe he'll choose to rent it or whatever. We've come up with a product that for every house in the United States, we know who the likely investors are. So that if my house was bought by a flipper, which I I just painted it, so maybe it should have been. Anyway, if this was bought by a flipper, I can tell you here are 100 individuals in this general area who buy and sell houses on an investment basis. And here is the most likely person that you should talk to if you flip Doug Newell's house. So things like that. There are ways to turn data into making the buy-sell process more efficient.
That's wonderful. So if you had 60 seconds to convince a room full of old school developers to use AI, what would you say?
Well, I'd again go to the point of the big guys are crowding you out, old school developers, and you've got to use some of the technology that they use. And to do that, you've got to find someone who's offering it to be cheap enough so that even the small guy, relatively speaking, can use it. And that that small improvements in your pricing or the efficiency of you acquiring land or things like that can make much larger improvements to your profitability. Right now, your profitability is probably about 10 or 15% on a house. Boy, if you could use some tool and get an extra, let's just say 4%, an extra 4% profit. If you've been making 10, taking you up to 14, that is huge for you. So that's sort of the quick thing, that AI is a tool. Don't worry about how it works. Worry about what it can do for you and what it can do to make your life better, to make more money for you, allow you to do things faster, because that's the mirror image of making more money. If you can do things faster, you will make more money. So to it as a tool. Don't worry about how it works. There are a lot of smart people in the world who have determined that AI, in fact, works, and you're not taking a big risk on it not working. Check the references of anybody who wants to use AI with you to make sure that they're the real deal, that they're not just claiming to use AI. That would be basically it.
I'm convinced. So what prop tech trend do you think is totally overrated?
Well, there are a lot of things in the, I don't want to say overrated, but in people naturally gravitated where the money is, and that was to multifamily residential units and things it can do for that. I think it can be very useful there. Again, if you're automating the way you're using AI to automate the showing of apartments, and it's a 500 apartment complex, again, it only takes that much improvement to allow you not to have two fewer employees or something who are usually just showing apartments all day and so forth. But I don't think that's really the strength of AI. And it's not clear that someone seeing an apartment necessarily wants to deal with a computer. Handing them a tablet and saying it's unit 24C may not be as effective as a real person if they're skilled showing an apartment for a possible to. So there is in prop tech some people who are trying different things that may not ultimately prove to be cost effective.
So, which part of real estate that AI shouldn't touch? What do you think?
Shouldn't touch. I try to stay away from things involving the government. Takes too long, too complex kind of thing. The United States government owns probably 20 or 25% of the land mass of America. And they can do what they want and manage it how they want and all that stuff. I'll stay away from that. Thank you.
Okay. So, you have started 7 companies. What's the biggest life lesson those taught you?
Persistence that I may have, well, many of them more than usual have been successful. However, I must admit one of them died, and that was almost like losing a member of the family, not to overemphasize it, but I had some investors who were public people and I couldn't watch them on TV. I felt I had let them down by letting that one company fail, although probably wasn't my fault, but ultimately, if you're the CEO, everything's your fault. Anyway, but yeah, I think persistence. Uh, there are good days and there are bad days, and there are days that you find out you've just lost your biggest customer, and so you start scrambling. And how do I find replacements and things like that? Uh, you don't give up. You just keep going and it all works out. I've had multiple successes, and a couple of them have been reasonably spectacular successes that allowed me to live comfortably. So I'd recommend persistence. There's a point at which the market, though, tells you you've got a dumb idea. If you can't sell anything of something and you've been trying it for 6 months or a year, to try it for another 6 months or a year is probably, the market is telling you that it doesn't want what you're doing if you've used common sense as far as how you're trying to market it.
You once said business is about people.
People.
What's something you
Yes.
learned about leading them well?
Yes. Well, it was simply that in dealing with technologists, people are rightfully proud of their knowledge of technology. I've known people who are expert in all sorts of database technology. And that's good. And that helps them earn a living. And they are powerful contributors to a team. However, they have to understand that it's not just the neatest, coolest technology. It's about people, and people have to make decisions. The decisions ultimately are often based on the cost of something or the efficiency of it or whatever. So you have to put things in people terms. Going back 30 or 40 years ago, I had an analyst working for me, and he had built a predictive model, and he was very proud of it. And I think it was an excellent one. He expressed that he didn't care if anybody ever used it. In his mind, it was a work of art. And he had just painted the modeling equivalent of the Mona Lisa. And if anybody saw it, he didn't care. He knew he had achieved this. And as the manager of his business, I was appalled by that. It's like, no, it's about people. If you build something and no one gets any use of it and no one gets value of it, it is worthless. I don't care if it's the perfect thing that is going to predict some obscure thing. Nobody's found value. Nobody's bought it. Nobody's used that money to pay their mortgage. Nobody has put their kids through school with some of that money. You have just built this abstract thing that you might as well have sent into space or something to endlessly fly through space. It is worthless. So I have to keep reminding myself and my team, who are very skilled technically, that we have to try to step away and think about things from the client's perspective. Know who you're talking to. Try to imagine what's going on in his head. What did you just say? How is he going to interpret that? Is this going to be interpreted as, oh, here comes a technology and this could put me out of work? Or here comes a technology that could make my life easier and double my income? And how you've just phrased the last sentence or two could put it in either of those categories. And so you have to think like the person you're talking to or communicating to, again, whether it's written or oral or whatever. You've got to put yourself on the other side in order to be effective. And it
I see.
doesn't matter if you may be smarter than they are, you may be less intelligent than they are. It doesn't matter. It's communications.
True. So, talking about the team, there was a time you almost ran out of money before Christmas. How did you keep the team together?
I guess that's leadership. I was talking to an investor and we were optimistic. We had been talking to the investor since February. This is how long these things take. So I think we met the investor in February, and it's now, we ran out of money somewhere around maybe the 1st of November. And when you run out of money, no one gets paid. And so you just sit down with them all and with your team and say, hey, here's what the possible investor has said. I think this is positive. I will understand if you have to go on to something else because you all have personal expenses and things and families to support and so forth. And yes, it was, the money finally came through on the 23rd of December, and we were closing for Christmas on the 24th. And I had already made the decision that we were not reopening without the money. Again, I had stretched these people out for 6 weeks, and the wives were asking, why are you going into work? We don't get a paycheck anymore, and things like that. And I had decided to just end it, and, an experiment that had failed, because part of the experiment is finding someone who believes in you enough that they will write a check. And that's just as important as someone who will buy your product from you and things like that. So they came through. That particular investor sort of waited till they were certain we were out of money. And to be candid with you, I believe that was a negotiating tactic for them. That in the final days of a transaction of an investor investing in a startup, there are items that are negotiated. And being out of money for 6 weeks, I told my lawyers, no, there is no negotiation. This is capitulation. Whatever they want, you know, 49% of the company, and they want certain rights and so forth. If they want to replace the CEO, I'm gone. But the company needs this money. The company will give anything for that money because the company is dead without the money. So they made sure that I was out of money. So I was in that bargaining position. I think that they are very tough businessmen. They didn't earn any points. I didn't send them any Christmas cards or anything based upon my love for them, but they ran me out of money before they invested.
You did great. So, if you could talk to your younger self before your first startup, what would you tell him?
Let's see. Go ahead and buy that stock called Microsoft. It looks promising. Being this old, I mean, I literally remember when Microsoft did their initial public offering. And short digression, I did buy, or I told my stockbroker early on to buy this company called Intel. And he screwed up and he bought a company called ITEL. ITEL was a failing shipping company out of Seattle. And by the time we straightened the mess out that he had bought the wrong company for me, this is my stockbroker again. Intel had doubled or tripled and it was going great. And I thought I had missed the opportunity to make big profits on that. So I don't think I ever bought Intel again, and I missed that opportunity. But aside, that's true of anybody. You could have bought Bitcoin at, a dollar a piece or something. We all could have. I think if I had it to do over again, I would have become an entrepreneur earlier. Let's see. I was probably about 45 years old when I was a founder of a company. And it was like freedom. I could make decisions in the bounds of my partners on that company and so forth. But it was a good thing. It is not for the risk averse. And so somebody should look at themselves and their family who are part of the experience. They should look at themselves and their family and say, how well will they tolerate risk? If you're going to lose a lot of sleep, a lot of nights, because you've just bet things on one of my companies, against my wife's wishes, bet the house. I lost the house. I'm now in a different house. That was this. As a matter of fact, this is, I think, the first time on this podcast that I'm admitting that I lost the house. We had moved. That was the cover story. We just moved, but we lost the house because the I had lost a lot of money on. That was the of the 7 companies I've started. That was the only one that failed, and it failed because someone had sold us basically fraudulent data, and my legal options against them were limited based upon the contract I had signed. And so we closed up that company, and I wrote off a bunch of money, and so did my investors. But that was sort of the extreme of risk. But again, it's not for the risk averse. It's exciting. A friend of mine suggested that I start all these. I've started all these companies because I'm an adrenaline junkie. That other people use drugs and I use adrenaline. Well, it is exciting coming in, and it's exciting talking to you and your listeners on this podcast. A lot of things I do are exciting. I have to plot new products that haven't reached the market yet in the real estate space. We've got a proposal coming up that is going to be many millions of dollars, and I've got to focus on that to get my vision and my knowledge of responding to requests for proposal. I've got to encapsulate all that in that proposal. If we win, um, I'm financially successful for the rest of my life, kind of thing. If we lose, then I put down a bet of the company's time and money on something that has failed, and we write it off, and that hurts. So that's the world of being an entrepreneur, and I recommend it if your stomach can take it.
I'm sure you will learn. So, what's one thing you used to believe that turned out completely wrong?
Something I believe that often I assume that people uh, know more than they do. Some people don't. Yeah. I went to look at a house yesterday. I'm thinking of buying it to flip it. And I assumed that the real estate agent world would have evaluated the house better than they had. Unfortunately, I wasted about 2 hours of a real estate agent's time and about equal amount of my time that could have been doing something useful. I assumed that the real estate agent knew that this house was beyond saving, that there was, because of the flood that had come through, there was a 20-foot gorge in front of the house. So I had to climb down the gorge and then back up hand over hand through the gorge, jumping over a rushing stream and so forth to get up there. And she had no idea that the place was, she could have saved me my time and her time had she said that every floor in the place was warped because of the flood and people had left doors open. And so anyway, it was beyond redemption, and she should have known that. And that's just typical of me. I just, okay, she'll warn me if the place is a junk.
Great. So, you have said luck matters.
Yeah.
How can someone create their own luck?
Well, you create your own luck by being very good at what you do. That doesn't save you from luck. You could, well, I almost ran into bad luck. Again, 26 years ago, being an early adapter, I want to be very careful, very clear here. I did not discover any AI, or I did not personally design any AI. We commercialized some ideas that were floating around in the public domain. But in that process, that investor might not have written that check on December 31st, right? And that would have been just bad luck for me, that maybe I had talked to the wrong investors, or the investor on the 20th of December of that year, the investor, the head man at the investor shop, could have had an attack of appendicitis, and he could have been in the hospital for a week or 2 weeks. And that has nothing to do with me. That's just bad luck on my part, that he wasn't able to close the deal before my company died, and with it would have died that particular commercialization of AI that I was working on. So that would have been bad luck. Likewise, good luck. I could have bumped into someone on an airplane. Matter of fact, we did bump into someone on an airplane who ended up writing us a check. And if one of my employees had not been flying from, I think, San Francisco or something to Boston and sat next to the right person and they struck up a conversation, what do you do? Blah, 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 blah. And that individual turned out to be one of the early founders of Pizza Hut. And he had a significant amount of money. He died some years later, a billionaire. But he happened to be sitting in the right seat at the right time. And my employee was explaining to him this AI thing and and he immediately, by the way, took us into a chain of his Pizza Hut locations that he owned. I think they were in Houston. And we talked about how we might apply the artificial intelligence to help his scheduling or something. It's been many, many years ago, but that was just good luck. That was just dumb good luck. He liked the story. Basically, he wrote us a check for $500,000 and didn't focus particularly on how many shares he was get what percent of the company. He just wanted in, and he had enough money that here you go, here's $500,000. So that's just good luck. You can't do anything about it. You can work hard to be on the top of your game all the time, but especially when it really matters. You're in front of investors. You've got to shine. You've got to have your presentation tight. And so forth. You've got to have researched other investments they've made. If they think that your investment might make them look better on some other investment, then you bring that to bear and so forth. But it's really, whether you're selling to a client or I want this proposal that we're sending out on the multi-million-dollar deal that we're going after, I want that to be the best document I have ever been associated with. That's the level that I want. I did that before. I was doing work with UBS Bank in Switzerland, and I wrote a proposal, and I think it was 50 pages long. And after they received it, they thought they were going to pull my chain they said there was a typo on page 32. And I said, no, I didn't even have to look or think about it. I said, no, I read that document over at least 15 to 20 times, word for word. And I can tell you that there was no typo on any page because it was my best work. I want this one that's coming up to be even better than that one. By the way, at the UBS Bank, I met several lifelong friends. That's one of the great things that I've gotten out of working here. I've got a friend in Germany who basically he and I, we won't get into it. We've shared children. I sent one of my kids over and he vacationed with my child in the Italian Alps and so forth. And I've gotten household guests that he sent over. I love that part of it. People that I've employed, they are my friends forever. And selectively, I've gotten great friends from my work in Switzerland, my work in Germany, my work here in the US. That's one of the best things besides the excitement of being an entrepreneur.
Great. Wow. Beautifully put. So, for real estate developers who are listening, what's one simple thing they can do today to start using AI in their work?
And by developers, you're referring to builders, or
Yeah,
that's one of the
real
things.
estate developers.
Real estate in the United States is a $7 trillion business. Okay. All aspects of real estate. That makes it something approaching 25% of the entire US economy has something to do with real estate. How can someone use it now? Well, if they are acquiring land, you can use it to look at visually very quickly. You can spot opportunities that are in your particular area. People tend to specialize geographically. The US is too large for even the largest contractors to be doing the whole US. And besides that, there are parts of the US that are stagnant as far as real estate development. So you can use these powerful tools that rank every property taken your considerations. You hate putting down sewer pipe, so you want a sewer main to be nearby so you can just hook into it and so forth. And that may be true if you're building multifamily things and so forth. So that's one way. Another is in pricing. And then we have the data and we have the analytic tools, and we've got some very sharp people. Over the years, I've figured out how to hire excellent people, and I've got some real great ones. So we have sort of the components. I would encourage someone to come to me and say, hey, here's my problem. Can you think of any way of dealing with it? Quick example there, somebody came to me and said they wanted to know every pond or lake in the United States and who owns all the property that is pond front or lakefront kind of thing, because they wanted to sell them a service. So we have the data and we have the expertise. I don't believe it had ever been done before, but we analyzed and we found there are 4.7 million ponds or lakes in the United States. I think we excluded Alaska and Hawaii for reasons the client requested, but in any case, 4.7 million of them. And we were able to compile a list of tens of millions of people who own lakefront property in the United States who might want that service. So we can sort of take ad hoc things someone tosses at us and look at the tools we have. And sometimes we create data, which to those who don't focus on data analytics, that sounds like fishy. You're creating data. No, if you find price divided by earnings, you create price earnings. We've created things where, the ratio of two things, number of baths to the number of bedrooms. Having raised kids, you really like a fair number of bathrooms for early in the morning so everybody can, do their thing and get out of there. If it's one bathroom and 5 bedrooms, the house is going to be worth far less and so forth. So you create data, and that helps solve problems. So on the convention I was just at, someone was next door to us in a booth next door to us, and he was selling home elevators. And I explained to him, I can do that. I can spot every house that might be a customer of yours in the United States. And I didn't tell him, but I could probably do it in 48 hours. And he had already sold 50,000 elevators. So I'd take those 50,000, add on thousands of variables, and find the patterns as to who buys an elevator. First, you take all of the single floor buildings, toss them out, can't put an elevator in there. Then you pop out a segment that are affluent, and so forth, and age. And there are different components, but we can take that's part of the fun of the job, is solving ad hoc problems.
One piece of advice for someone who's trying to get into prop tech.
Well, yeah, here's a piece of advice. It is possible to start small. It was explained to me that there are multimillionaires in the United States who own many pieces of property, and they start small. Now, here's how they do it. They have a job in a car wash or something, right? But they're being prudent and putting aside a little money. They get up to $5,000. They've been doing their homework. So they've been learning everything they can about the business and what they're proposing to do. They take the $5,000 and they find a house that they think they might flip. They might buy and resell for more after it's had a coat of paint or something like that. Anyway, so they go up to the homeowner and they say, okay, I've got $5,000 here. I'll buy your house at $140,000 in 60 days from now. And if I can't deliver all the rest of the money to you, then you get to keep my $5,000 deposit. So the homeowner says, okay, I'll do that. That gives me time to find some other place to live and so forth. So the homeowner agrees to it. They sign a contract, and now the car wash person has the rights to buy that house. What he's going to do as quickly as possible is find somebody who will buy it from him at a greater price. Maybe he sells it for 10,000 more than he bought it at. His 5,000 that he was his original investment is now 10,000. So he can go do this twice more, or he can go upscale and buy a house and offer a $10,000 deposit on it. And now he's maybe buying a $50,000 house. Anyway, by doing this over and over and over again, if he doesn't mess up and lose all of his money, he can leverage that initial investment into eventually they tend to become rental landlords where they own 25 properties and they're collecting rent on them all and they're not selling them off to anybody else. They're just buying properties, fixing up and renting them. And over 20 or 30 years, the rent has paid off the mortgage and he owns this house free and clear that he's continuing to get rent on. And if he's got 20 or 30 of them, he is a multimillionaire. So that is, you can start small. In some cases, you can't start small and do it without a lot of hard work.
Great. What a great advice. So our last segment where I'm going to ask
Yes.
you rapid fire questions, just
Okay.
one-liner answer. So whatever comes to
Okay.
your mind right away. So gut feeling or data?
Gut feeling comes from lots of experience. I go for gut feeling because I can tell when data is screwed up. I'm thinking right now about bad data. Yeah.
Okay. So AI will never replace what?
Interpersonal feelings. I can tell more by looking at somebody in the eye, shaking their hand, and knowing their background than AI is going to be able to do.
Very well. Biggest myth about prop tech?
Biggest myth, I'd say 99.9% of the world's population never even heard of the term. That's sort of an inside phrase, prop tech.
Great. Favorite part of building a company?
Hiring.
One word that describes the future of real estate?
Forever. I think it was an American humorist, I think they call him, who said, buy real estate. They're not making any more of it. So, yeah.
What's one mistake developers keep repeating?
Trying to do things on the cheap, trying to cut corners. And I think it often comes back to bite them in terms of reputation.
Yeah. One of my last guests, he tried to cut corners. It cost him like £500,000.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So if Swarmalytics were a superhero, what would its superpower be?
Seeing the future.
Great. More time or more data?
More time or what? More data?
Yeah.
More data. I can always make things faster by adding more computers. I've got about 75 computers working now. I can add another 75. Things will run twice as fast.
Right. Favorite tech tool you can't live without?
My calendar. I get up in the morning and what's facing me today? Okay, I start preparing myself mentally.
Great.
It's an old tool, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but that's something that keeps you, organized.
Yes.
One thing people get wrong about AI.
But there's still a lot of people who are frightened by it. And when I say, what do you do for a living? I say AI, and they go, it's like I'm selling evil. I'm going to put people out of work. I'm going to create robots that run amok. I'm going to take control of the world. And they're against all of those.
Great. That's true. That's what's happening. The most human thing AI will never understand.
I'd go almost the romantic answer there, and interactions between men and women.
Great. Real estate in one word.
Enormous.
Favorite city to build in and why?
I don't build myself, but I considered Austin, Texas.
And why?
Huge companies are moving there all the time. It is a business-friendly environment. They're pro-business. They're not like, oh, you're something that has to be dealt with. It's like, how can we help you?
Right. One thing you daily do that keeps you sharp, other than looking at the calendar first thing in the morning.
What keeps me sharp? I have large dogs, Russian wolfhounds, and I walk them several times a day. That kind of wakes me up in the morning. There's nothing like having 200 pounds of dog on a leash and having them see a deer that they want to chase. then it becomes like, okay, I'm about 205, they're about 200, they're in better shape than I am. This is not going to be pretty.
Coffee or code?
Coke.
No, coffee or code?
Code. Coffee or code? Coffee. I bridge the gap between technology, but I am not a hardcore coder, or I can read a little bit of code and figure out what it's saying, but coffee.
One book that changed how you think?
There's one that was written by one of Silicon Valley's entrepreneurs. I think it might have been Thiel or something. 0 to 1.
If you could,
Yeah. Go
go
ahead.
ahead. Oh,
Just, I rarely read a book twice, but there was so much in there. I didn't agree with all of it, but I thought that it was all incredibly insightful. 0
great.
to 1.
0 to 1. Great. One word your team would use to describe you?
I would hope integrity.
The weirdest or funniest thing AI could never predict?
I'm not sure AI will ever be very good at jokes. However, AI cannot predict sort of anything having to do with an afterlife. I was thinking about it the other day, and the movie 2001 came to mind, or maybe it was 2010. But in any case, they were turning off the computer, and the computer asked, "Will I dream?" And if you start taking that apart, it starts getting fairly profound, that he was about to cease to exist, and he wondered if he would dream.
Great. That was it. Thank you so
Okay.
much, Doug. Before we close, if our listeners, anybody from investors or developers would want to contact you, where could they reach out to you?
Probably the best place is through email, Newell, Newell, at Swarmalytics.com.
Great. Thank you so much, Doug. It was great talking to you. I enjoyed every answer you gave in detail, the information and the knowledge that you have. It was great to have you on the show.
Okay, thank you very much. I've had a good time on the show. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for
This is
inviting me.
my pleasure. This is Real Talk. See you next time.